Welcome to Fluent Daily, the English listening channel for advanced learners at B2 and C1 level. Every episode features a rich, flowing conversation in natural English on a topic that is genuinely worth thinking about: history, psychology, science, philosophy, and more. There are no simplified sentences here, no slow speech, no vocabulary drills. Just real English spoken naturally on ideas that matter. This is Fluent Daily. Let's get into it.
Today we have a great story, so let's get started right now. Back in 1973, there was this team of cognitive psychologists, and they brought a group of world-class chess grandmasters into a lab.
Right, the really elite guys.
Yeah, exactly. Like the kind of individuals who could play, multiple games blindfolded all at the same time and actually win.
Which just sounds insane.
It does. So the researchers, they showed them this chessboard taken right out of the middle of a super competitive match. But, and here's the catch, they only let the grandmasters look at it for 5 seconds.
Just 5 seconds.
Literally 5 seconds. Then they covered the board up and said, all right, recreate the exact positions of all 30-plus pieces from memory.
And let me guess, they nailed it.
Oh, completely. Unsurprisingly, they recreated the boards with, near perfect 90% accuracy.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it looked like magic. It really looked like they possessed some kind of superhuman, genetically endowed photographic memory.
Right, which is what we all tend to assume.
Oh. Exactly. But then the researchers introduced this twist. They took the exact same chess pieces, but this time they scattered them completely randomly across the board.
Like just totally ignoring the actual rules of chess.
Totally. In ways that made zero strategic sense, just random pieces everywhere. They gave the grandmasters another 5 seconds.
Okay.
And when they asked them to recreate the board this time, that superhuman memory just completely vanished.
Really? Just gone?
Completely gone. They performed no better than absolute beginners. And so for today's deep dive, we are undertaking a bit of a mission. We are going to completely dismantle this deeply ingrained myth of innate talent.
It's a huge myth.
It is. We are going to unpack the precise psychological, mechanical, and biological realities of how elite expertise is actually built from the ground up. And, for the listener, we're going to show you why that chess grandmaster's brain isn't actually as different from yours as you might think.
Yeah, and the implications of that single chess experiment alone are just staggering when you really start to pull at the threads.
Oh, for sure.
Because, when we look at the gap between our own baseline competence and the absolute mastery of an elite performer, whether that's a virtuoso violinist or a top-tier surgeon or, like you said, a chess grandmaster, our brains immediately seek a comfortable excuse.
Right. We want an out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We want to categorize these individuals as, a fundamentally different species.
Yeah.
We point to innate talent because it absolves us.
It totally does.
Right? Because if they were simply born with this magical gift, then our failure to reach that level is just a matter of the genetic lottery. It's not a failure of our own effort.
That is the ultimate defense mechanism, isn't it? If talent is just this biological inheritance, I don't have to feel bad about my own mediocrity.
Precisely.
And to you, the listener, I want to establish our goal for this deep dive right away. Whether you're currently struggling to master a new language or trying to break through a plateau in your career, or if you're just fascinated by human potential, we are going to completely reframe how you approach your own capabilities.
It really changes everything.
It does. We're going to explore the blueprint of human mastery. But I think before we dive into the cognitive mechanics, we do need to set a breathline.
Yeah, and that's important.
Because throwing the word myth around can get a little tricky, right? We have to be honest about where genetic talent actually does exert a massive, undeniable influence.
Right. Establishing that boundary is critical. Otherwise, the entire premise just falls apart under basic scrutiny.
Right.
The research is really unsparing on this point. Genetic endowment is a very real, very limiting factor in purely physical domains.
So we're talking about sports and things like that.
Exactly. If you look at elite athletics, there are hard biological ceilings that no amount of psychological framing or practice can shatter.
Right out of the gate, I'm thinking of something like height in basketball.
The classic example.
Right. I mean, if I decide today that I want to be the starting center for the Lakers, my work ethic is completely irrelevant.
Pretty much.
I am not 7 feet tall, and I cannot, practice my way into a larger skeletal structure.
No, you definitely cannot. Or consider the physiological metrics they track in endurance sports. Like VO2 max, for instance.
Which is what exactly?
It's basically the maximum rate at which your heart, lungs, and muscles can effectively use oxygen during exercise.
Okay, got it.
And while training can improve your baseline VO2 max by, maybe 15 to 20%, your absolute upper limit is dictated by the genetic dimensions of your cardiovascular system.
Wow, so there's just a hard cap.
There really is.
Yeah.
And the same applies to things like the distribution of muscle fiber types.
Oh, like fast twitch versus slow twitch.
Exactly. Elite sprinters are born with a disproportionately high ratio of fast-twitch muscle fibers, which contract rapidly and generate explosive power.
Makes sense.
But then your Olympic marathoners are genetically endowed with an abundance of slow-twitch fibers for extreme endurance. You can optimize what you have to the absolute biological limit, but if your genetic ceiling is lower than your competitors, you're not going to beat them on a purely physical playing field.
Okay, so the hardware of the body really holds the trump card when the task is purely physical, lifting heavier weights, running faster, reaching a higher shelf.
Right, the hardware matters there.
But here is where the entire paradigm flips and where the research we dug into gets genuinely thrilling.
It's a huge shift.
It is. The moment we step away from those strictly biomechanical constraints and enter the realm of cognitive and skill domains, the rule book just gets thrown out the window.
The shift is so dramatic. When you examine fields that prioritize complex decision-making, pattern recognition, fine motor control domains like classical music composition or surgical precision, language acquisition, scientific research, the role of that innate genetic advantage just shrinks to almost zero.
It's almost non-existent.
Yeah. The societal assumption that a brilliant mathematician or a world-class pianist was simply born with a gift is just not supported by the longitudinal data.
Which implies we've been attributing these monumental human achievements to the totally wrong variable this whole time.
We absolutely have.
If genetic destiny isn't the secret ingredient behind a Nobel Prize-winning scientist or a master linguist, we really have to figure out what actually propels them to that level.
Right.
And this naturally leads us into the foundational architecture of expertise research, which was primarily spearheaded by K. Anders Ericsson.
Yes, Anders Ericsson. He dedicated 3 decades of his life to systematically investigating expert performance across pretty much every conceivable domain.
3 decades?
Yeah, it's his life's work. And he didn't just study prodigies. He studied the very mechanics of how human beings acquire complex skills.
Okay.
And out of that massive body of work emerged a framework that completely revolutionized cognitive psychology. It's the concept of deliberate practice.
I really want to spend significant time unpacking this because, well, deliberate practice has kind of suffered the terrible fate of becoming a corporate buzzword.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere now.
You see it on productivity blogs, you hear it in middle management seminars, and it's usually watered down to mean practically nothing.
Right. It just becomes a synonym for trying really hard.
Exactly. Just trying hard or paying attention while you work.
Which is a tragedy for anyone actually trying to learn a skill, because Ericsson's definition is excruciatingly specific.
It's very rigid.
Extremely. It is an empirically grounded methodology that is entirely distinct from the way 99% of the population engages with learning. Most of us just engage in what Ericsson calls naive repetition.
Okay, let me use my own life as the guinea pig here to illustrate naive repetition.
Go for it.
So, I play casual tennis with a group of friends every single weekend. And I've been doing this for nearly a decade.
That's a lot of tennis.
Right. I buy the nice rackets, I sweat, I run around the court, and I feel this real sense of accomplishment because I am putting in hours.
Sure, you're on the court a lot.
The assumption is that because I am accumulating time on the court, I'm accumulating expertise. But based on this framework, I am essentially just cementing my own mediocrity.
Well, actually, you're doing something arguably worse than cementing mediocrity. You are highly optimizing your own bad habits.
Ouch.
I mean, you are automating a flawed swing so deeply that it will take tremendous effort to unlearn it later.
That makes total sense, sadly.
True deliberate practice demands that you step entirely outside of that automated comfort zone. Ericsson outlines 5 strict, non-negotiable criteria for an activity to even qualify as deliberate practice, and your weekend tennis match basically fails almost all of them.
Okay, I want to try to guess these based on my own failures.
Let's hear it.
If naive repetition is just playing the game, the first criteria must have something to do with the difficulty level, right?
Spot on.
Like, I can't just rally back and forth hitting the shots I already know how to hit perfectly well.
That is the first pillar. The practice activity must be explicitly designed to improve performance by targeting skills that rest on the bleeding edge of your current competence.
The bleeding edge.
Yes, it must be slightly above what you're currently capable of achieving reliably.
So instead of playing a match, I need to focus entirely on, say, my backhand top spin lob, which is a shot I currently shank into the net like 4 out of 5 times.
Yes, exactly. You must force your nervous system into a state of failure and adaptation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which leads directly into the second criterion. The activity requires full, exhausting cognitive concentration.
It's exhausting concentration.
You cannot be on autopilot. You can't be chatting with your tennis partner about where to get lunch afterward. Your mental bandwidth has to be entirely consumed by the mechanical execution of the task.
Which explains why it's so mentally draining. I mean, if I'm fully engaged like that, I can probably only sustain that level of focus for a really short window before my brain just begs to go back to autopilot.
And that's totally normal. Most elite performers max out at about 4 hours of true deliberate practice a day.
Only 4 hours.
Yeah. And usually broken up into shorter sessions because the cognitive load is just immense. You can't sustain it for 8 hours.
Wow. Okay. So what's the third one?
The third criterion requires immediate, real-time feedback on the accuracy and quality of your performance.
Real-time feedback.
Right. It allows for instantaneous course correction.
See, this is where the solo learner really gets stuck. Because in a tennis match, my feedback is simply, the ball went out of bounds.
Which doesn't help you fix it.
No, it's useless information. I need to know why it went out of bounds the exact millisecond I strike the ball. Was my wrist pronated? Was my footwork late? I have no idea.
Exactly. Without that granular diagnostic feedback, you cannot adjust the mechanics for the next repetition.
Right.
And speaking of repetitions, the fourth pillar demands the isolated repetition of highly specific micro-components of a skill.
Micro-components.
Yeah. You don't play a tennis match to get better at tennis. You stand in one exact spot on the baseline and have a machine feed you 500 identical balls to your backhand so you can isolate the specific kinetic chain of your hips and shoulders.
God, that sounds incredibly monotonous.
It is.
Which kind of leads to what I think is the most fascinating and frankly comforting part of Erickson's research. The explicit acknowledgement that this whole process is actually miserable.
It really is. The fifth and perhaps most misunderstood criterion is that deliberate practice is inherently not enjoyable.
Not enjoyable at all.
It's uncomfortable, it is frustrating, and it requires immense sustained motivation to endure. When you are engaging in deliberate practice, you are constantly, aggressively confronting your own inadequacy.
You're just living in failure.
You're actively choosing to live in the space where you fail over and over again.
I think this completely shatters that romanticized Hollywood vision of the prodigy.
Oh, completely.
We always picture the young genius joyfully playing the piano, the music just flowing through them as they smile, just lost in the sheer ecstasy of their own innate gift.
The Mozart myth.
Exactly. But the reality is that the path to mastery is paved with isolated, frustrating, teeth-gritting repetition. And the ultimate proof of this lives in Erickson's landmark study at the Berlin Academy of Music, right?
Absolutely. The 1993 Berlin Violin Study is basically the bedrock upon which the modern understanding of expertise is built.
Let's dig into that.
So the researchers didn't just look at average musicians. They went to an elite academy with a global reputation. And they worked closely with the professors there to categorize the violin students into 3 distinct tiers by the time they reached 20 years of age.
Let's break down those tiers for the listener, because the distinctions are really vital.
Sure. So the top tier consisted of the absolute best students. These were the ones heavily favored to become world-class international soloists.
The cream of the crop.
Exactly. Then the middle tier were the good students. Individuals who were highly competent and on track to secure steady careers playing in professional symphony orchestras.
Still great, but not soloists.
Right. And then the third tier consisted of students who were studying in the music education department with the goal of becoming public school music teachers.
Okay, so we have the future Mozarts, the working professionals, and the teachers. Now, if society's narrative about innate talent were true, you would totally expect the top tier to have practiced less, right?
That's what most people would assume.
Right, because the assumption is that the genius simply absorbs the music faster, requiring less effort to achieve a higher output.
Well, that is the exact hypothesis the data completely annihilated.
Oh, I love it. Tell me the numbers.
When the researchers calculated the lifetime hours of deliberate practice accumulated by these students, the math was incredibly stark. By age 20, the top tier, the future international soloists, had accumulated an average of 10,000 hours of deliberate, isolated, solitary practice.
10,000 hours?
Yes. The middle tier, the orchestral players, had accumulated around 7,500 hours.
Oh.
And the future music teachers had accumulated only about 5,000 hours.
The correlation is practically a straight line.
It really is.
But the detail that really solidifies this for me isn't just the raw data, it's the qualitative assessment from the professors themselves.
Right, the interviews.
Because these are elite instructors who have dedicated their entire lives to identifying and nurturing musical talent. Surely they looked at the 10,000-hour group and said, yes, these students just had a biological gift for the violin.
They observed the exact opposite.
Really?
When interviewed, the teachers did not attribute the performance gap to faster learning or innate giftedness. They didn't claim that the elite students magically extracted more skill out of each hour of practice.
So what was the difference?
The fundamental differentiator was volume. The elite students simply spent twice as many hours enduring the agonizing, cognitively draining process of deliberate practice than the lowest tier.
I really want to pause here because understanding the reality of that timeline is crucial for you, the listener.
Yeah, it's heavy.
10,000 hours by age 20 means these individuals were likely practicing for 3 to 4 hours a day, every single day, throughout their entire adolescence.
No days off.
While their peers were socializing, relaxing, going to the movies, or playing video games, they were locked in a practice room, deliberately attacking their own weaknesses.
The sheer psychological endurance required to maintain that schedule is immense.
It's unbelievable.
And it naturally begs a profound question. If you are willing to subject yourself to thousands of hours of this highly targeted, deeply uncomfortable strain, what is physically and psychologically happening inside your head?
Right.
What is the actual payoff for all that misery?
I am so glad you asked that because I am really trying to visualize the internal mechanics here. It can't just be that their fingers move faster.
No, not at all.
There has to be a fundamental software update happening in the brain.
And the software update is massive.
Yeah.
Psychologically, what deliberate practice is constructing is something cognitive scientists call domain-specific mental representations, or basically pattern libraries.
Okay, let's dissect this concept of mental representations, because I feel like this ties perfectly back to that 1973 chess study I brought up at the very beginning.
It explains the chess study perfectly.
Tell me how.
So, when a novice looks at a complex environment, like a chessboard in the middle of a match, they perceive a chaotic collection of individual disconnected data points.
Just a bunch of wooden pieces.
Right. They see a knight here, a pawn there, a bishop over there. To figure out what to do, they have to hold all those individual pieces in their working memory and use slow, sequential, rule-based logic to calculate their next move.
Which is incredibly taxing. It's like trying to navigate a new city by reading a map at every single intersection.
Exactly.
But the Grandmaster doesn't do that.
No, the Grandmaster doesn't see individual pieces at all.
Wait, really?
When they glance at the board for 5 seconds, they recognize massive interconnected patterns, pawn structures, defensive walls, lines of attack.
Oh, wow.
And they immediately recognize those from the thousands of hours of deliberate practice stored in their mental library. They are perceiving higher-order concepts as single units.
This reminds me of how we learn to read.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right, because if you hand a 5-year-old a book, they have to sound out every single letter, C-A-T.
Right. They are processing individual data points.
Exactly. But as an adult, if I flash the word C-A-T on a screen for a millisecond, you don't read the letters. You instantly recognize the shape of the word, and the concept of a feline just pops into your head.
The reading analogy is flawless. The chess grandmasters have spent a decade building a visual vocabulary of chess.
A visual vocabulary. I love that.
So when the researchers scattered the pieces randomly, they destroyed the vocabulary. They presented the grandmasters with a string of random, unpronounceable letters. And without the meaningful patterns to recognize, the grandmasters were forced back into novice behavior, trying to memorize individual disconnected data points.
And so their performance just plummeted.
Exactly.
This shift from calculating individual variables to instantly recognizing macro patterns has implications far beyond games, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about environments where taking the time to calculate variables will literally get you killed. I'm thinking about Gary Klein's research on decision-making in extreme, high-stakes environments.
Yes, Klein's work on recognition-primed decision-making, or RPDM. It takes this whole concept out of the laboratory and straight into the fire.
Literally.
Literally. He studied professionals who have to make life or death decisions in seconds. We're talking firefighters, military platoon leaders, intensive care unit nurses. He wanted to know how they choose a course of action when they literally don't have time to think.
And the initial assumption, I would guess, is that these people just have incredibly fast analytical processing skills.
Right.
That they can make a pros and cons list in their head in 2 seconds flat.
That was the assumption. But Klein discovered that they rarely compare options at all.
Really?
Yeah. If a firefighter enters a burning building and the floor is about to collapse, they don't stand there and weigh the probability of survival against the structural integrity of oak versus pine.
That would be absurd.
Right. Instead, they absorb the chaotic environment, the specific color of the smoke, the radiant heat, the sound of the burning timber, the squishy feeling of the floorboards.
Wow.
And their brain instantly matches that sensory data to a familiar pattern stored in their mental library.
The pattern library built from hundreds of previous fires.
Exactly. The recognition of the pattern instantaneously retrieves the correct response. They yell, "Get out!" right before the floor caves in. To a bystander, it looks like a supernatural sixth sense or pure intuition.
It looks like magic, but it's not magic, and it's not guessing. The intuition of the expert is simply highly calibrated pattern recognition operating at subconscious speeds.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay, I am fully on board with the psychological software. I understand mental representations, but I want to get into the hardware.
Let's do it.
How does a thought or a pattern physically manifest in the tissue of the brain? Because if deliberate practice is physically changing us, there has to be a biological footprint.
And the biological footprint is perhaps the most awe-inspiring part of the human machine. It all comes down to the mechanics of neuroplasticity, specifically a cellular process known as long-term potentiation, or LTP.
Okay, give me the translation for long-term potentiation. How does that work on a microscopic level?
So the foundational axiom of neuroscience, coined by Donald Hebb, is that neurons that fire together wire together.
Fire together, wire together. Catchy.
It is. When you attempt a new skill, a specific network of neurons in your brain fires an electrical signal to execute that movement or thought. In the beginning, the synapses between those neurons are weak.
Okay.
The signal struggles to get through, which is why your first attempt at a tennis backhand feels incredibly clumsy and uncoordinated.
You know, I always picture this like trying to forge a trail through a dense, overgrown jungle.
I like that.
The first time you walk it, you are hacking away with a machete, getting tangled in vines, and it takes an hour to move 50 feet. It's exhausting.
That's a brilliant visualization. Now imagine you walk that exact same path 5,000 times.
Right.
You trample the underbrush, the dirt gets packed down, and eventually you have a perfectly smooth, unobstructed dirt road.
Ah, I see.
That is long-term potentiation. Through deliberate, repeated activation, the synaptic connections physically strengthen. Furthermore, the brain engages in synaptic pruning. It actively cuts away the irrelevant, distracting side paths.
So the neural circuit becomes hyper-specialized, which must have a massive impact on energy consumption because the brain is a notoriously greedy organ when it comes to calories.
It is a massive energy hog, and that is precisely why the brain optimizes these pathways. The biological result of LTP is a dramatic decrease in the metabolic cost of executing the skill.
Wait, really?
Yes. An expert literally burns fewer calories and uses less glucose to perform a complex task than a novice does, because their neural circuitry is operating with zero friction.
That perfectly explains why mastery looks so effortless.
Because biologically it is.
The virtuoso isn't just hiding their effort. Biologically, they are genuinely expending less effort to achieve a vastly superior result.
Exactly.
But the research doesn't stop at dirt roads. The sources we reviewed brought in the work of researchers like Robert Bjork and Daniel Coyle, focusing on a substance that completely changes the speed limit of these neural pathways.
Ah, yes. Myelination.
Myelination.
If long-term potentiation is clearing the dirt road in your jungle, myelination is the construction crew coming in and paving that dirt road with industrial asphalt so you can drive a Formula One car on it.
Okay, I need to know everything about myelin. What is this stuff and how do we get more of it?
So myelin is a biological substance. It's this white, fatty tissue that physically wraps around the axons, which are the long thread-like parts of a neuron that conduct electrical impulses. Think of it exactly like the heavy rubber insulation wrapped around a copper electrical wire.
Okay, and if I remember my high school physics, the insulation prevents the electrical charge from leaking out into the surrounding environment, right? Keeping the signal strong.
Precisely. In an unmyelinated neuron, the electrical signal dissipates as it travels. It moves relatively slowly and inefficiently.
Right.
But when you engage in sustained, highly focused neural activity, which again is the definition of deliberate, practice-specialized cells called oligodendrocytes, sense that electrical firing. And they begin wrapping layers of myelin around that specific neural circuit.
So the brain actually detects that a specific circuit is being pushed to its limit, and it responds by fortifying it with biological insulation.
That is exactly what happens.
What is the actual performance benefit of a myelinated pathway versus an unmyelinated one? Give me the specs.
The difference is staggering. A heavily myelinated neural circuit can transmit electrical signals up to 100 times faster than an unmyelinated one.
100 times?
Yes. Furthermore, the refractory period, which is the time it takes for the neuron to reset and be ready to fire again, is vastly reduced.
100 times faster. When you see an elite typist churning out 150 words a minute, or a pianist executing a trill so fast their fingers literally blur, we aren't just looking at good muscle memory.
No, we are not.
We are looking at intensely myelinated neural superhighways firing at maximum biological velocity.
That is the biological reality of expertise. You are physically reshaping the architecture of your brain.
That's wild.
And if you want macroscopic structural proof of this, like proof that you can actually see on a brain scan, we have to discuss the London taxi drivers.
I was so hoping we would get to this, because it is one of the most famous and elegantly designed studies in modern neuroscience.
It's brilliant.
And the context here is key for the listener. To become a licensed driver of the iconic black cabs in London, you cannot just rely on TPS. You have to pass this brutally difficult exam known as the knowledge.
The knowledge. It's legendary. It requires candidates to memorize the entire spatial layout of Greater London within a 6-mile radius of Charing Cross.
Which is massive.
We're talking about memorizing the precise locations of 25,000 individual streets, 20,000 landmarks, complex one-way systems, and the ability to instantly calculate the most direct route between any 2 points.
I've seen documentaries on these candidates. They spend 3 to 4 years driving around London on mopeds with clipboards mounted to the handlebars, rain or shine, just building this massive internal map.
Yeah, it's grueling.
It is an extreme, prolonged feat of intense spatial memorization.
So recognizing this unique population, neuroscientists at University College London put these taxi drivers into MRI machines. They specifically wanted to examine the hippocampus. It's a seahorse-shaped structure deep in the brain that plays a critical role in spatial navigation and memory consolidation.
And what did the MRI scans reveal when they compared the taxi drivers to a control group of just regular citizens?
The scans revealed a profound structural difference. The posterior region of the hippocampus in the taxi drivers was significantly enlarged compared to the control group. Yeah, there was literally more physical gray matter in that specific area.
That is incredible in itself. But the real smoking gun is the correlation with time, isn't it?
Yes, it is. The researchers found a direct positive correlation between the volume of the posterior hippocampus and the number of years the individual had spent navigating the streets as a taxi driver.
Wow.
The longer they engaged in the intense cognitive demand of spatial navigation, the larger that specific brain region grew.
It is the ultimate vindication of the neuroplasticity argument. The brain is not a fixed, static organ that you are just stuck with at birth.
Right at all.
It is a highly responsive, dynamic muscle that physically bulks up in response to the specific cognitive loads you force it to bear.
Exactly.
Which brings me to a massive collision point in our culture.
Uh-oh.
Because everything we've discussed so far, the 10,000 hours, the grueling practice, the myelin, it sounds incredibly familiar to anyone who has been alive in the last 20 years.
Right. You are anticipating the inevitable shadow that looms over all expertise research, the phenomena of the 10,000-hour rule.
Let's just face it head on. In 2008, Malcolm Gladwell published the book Outliers, and it completely saturated the global culture.
It was inescapable.
You couldn't attend a dinner party, read a business magazine, or go to a corporate retreat without someone evangelizing the 10,000-hour rule. Gladwell took Erickson's esoteric academic research and packaged it into a very neat, incredibly appealing pop culture law.
The law being?
That 10,000 hours of practice is the magic threshold required to achieve world-class mastery in any domain.
It was a masterclass in science communication, I'll give him that. But it was fundamentally flawed.
Yeah.
The simplification was so aggressive that it morphed the science into a fallacy. In fact, Anders Ericsson himself spent the latter part of his career publicly and rigorously objecting to Gladwell's characterization of his life's work.
Let's play forensic accountant here. Where exactly did Gladwell's interpretation deviate from the actual data? Because he based his rule directly on the Berlin Academy violinist study we just discussed. Right?
He did, but he committed a cardinal sin of statistical interpretation. In Erickson's study, 10,000 hours was simply the average amount of accumulated deliberate practice among the top-tier violinists. It was a statistical mean derived from a very specific sample. Gladwell mutated that average into a rigid threshold and a universal guarantee.
The implication in the pop culture version is that the 10,000th hour is a magical finish line, like a video game leveling system. Insert 10,000 hours of typing and out pops a Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist.
Exactly. But the actual data showed a massive range. Some world-class musicians in the study had accumulated significantly fewer than 10,000 hours by age 20.
Right.
While others required considerably more to reach the exact same level of proficiency. Furthermore, you cannot take a data point derived from classical violin training in a highly structured academy and apply it mathematically to writing code or managing a hedge fund or directing a film.
The required hours would fluctuate wildly based on the complexity of the skill, the quality of the teaching available, and the historical maturity of the domain itself. But I think the most dangerous part of the Gladwell myth isn't the number itself. It's the fact that it makes time the only relevant variable.
That is the fatal flaw.
It strips away the word deliberate. The Gladwell version makes people believe that if they just show up and punch the clock, if I just play my weekend tennis for 10,000 hours, I will eventually become Roger Federer.
Which we know isn't true.
Right. It completely ignores the agonizing, feedback-rich, cognitively exhausting quality of the practice that is actually building the myelin.
Right. 10,000 hours of naive repetition does not yield mastery. It yields a highly entrenched amateur. A practitioner who engages in 4,000 hours of meticulously designed, intensely focused, dynamically adjusted, deliberate practice will absolutely obliterate a competitor who blindly grinds through 10,000 hours of mindless repetition.
So if time isn't the only factor and deliberate practice is the true driver, we have to ask the hard scientific question: how powerful is deliberate practice, really?
That's the million-dollar question.
If we strip away the hype, what percentage of success does it actually account for?
To answer that with precision, we must turn to a major stress test of Erickson's theories. It's the 2014 meta-analysis conducted by Brooke McNamara and her colleagues.
Okay.
A meta-analysis is essentially a study of studies. They aggregated vast amounts of data across various domains to calculate exactly how much of the variance in human performance could be explained solely by accumulated deliberate practice.
I love meta-analyses because they filter out the noise of individual, potentially biased studies. So what did the numbers actually reveal?
The results were highly illuminating, and they provided a much-needed reality check. In highly structured games like chess or competitive Scrabble, deliberate practice accounted for approximately 26% of the variance in performance.
Which, in the messy world of behavioral science, 26% for a single variable is massive.
It is a dominant factor.
Right.
In music, it accounted for about 21% of the variance. In sports, it hovered around 18%.
Still incredibly significant. Those numbers validate everything Erickson claimed about the power of focused effort in those specific fields.
But here is where the data takes a sharp, unexpected turn.
I'm ready.
When the researchers looked at education and professions, which includes fields like corporate management, software engineering, or scientific research, deliberate practice accounted for a meager 4% of the variance in performance.
Wait, hold on. 4%.
4%.
That is a catastrophic drop-off. Why would the fundamental mechanism of neuroplasticity and skill acquisition work so flawlessly for a chess player or a violinist, but barely register for a mid-level manager or a research scientist? What is causing that discrepancy?
It has everything to do with the architecture of the domain itself. The meta-analysis highlighted the profound difference between structured and unstructured domains.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Think about chess, classical music, or gymnastics. These are highly structured environments. The rules are absolute and have not changed in centuries. The metrics for success are entirely objective.
Right. In chess, if I move my knight to the wrong square, my opponent takes it immediately. The feedback loop is closed in 3 seconds. I know exactly what I did wrong, and I can adjust.
Furthermore, in those structured domains, there are established, optimized pedagogies. We know exactly how to train a pianist because we've been refining the method for 300 years. The path to mastery is clearly mapped.
That makes sense.
So in those environments, if you apply the engine of deliberate practice, you will inevitably accelerate down that clear path.
But corporate management is not a structured domain.
Far from it. Management, entrepreneurship, and research are highly unstructured, diffuse, and chaotic domains. The rules change constantly based on market forces, culture, and technology.
Right.
What defines a good manager is highly subjective and context-dependent. Most importantly, the feedback loops are massively delayed.
That makes perfect sense. If I am a CEO and I decide to pivot my company's strategy, I might not know if that was a genius move or a fatal mistake for 3 to 5 years.
Exactly.
I cannot isolate the skill of strategic pivoting and practice it 500 times on a Tuesday afternoon.
Exactly. You lack the immediate diagnostic feedback required for LTP and myelination to occur efficiently. Therefore, in these ambiguous, unstructured domains, other variables surge in importance.
Like what?
Factors like social intelligence, emotional regulation, adaptability to shifting environments, access to resources, and perhaps certain baseline cognitive flexibilities. Those begin to heavily outweigh the sheer volume of practice hours.
This is a major revelation for anyone listening who works in a modern, knowledge-based economy. If deliberate practice only accounts for 4% of your success natively because your job is so unstructured, the ultimate competitive advantage would be finding a way to artificially inject structure into your chaotic job.
Yes.
You would have to aggressively engineer your own microfeedback loops.
That is the mark of a true professional in the modern era. You have to invent the metrics that allow you to practice deliberately.
But how do we actually do that? Because this leads me to a major logistical hurdle. If I need highly targeted practice and I need immediate diagnostic feedback to build mental representations in myelin, how do I generate that? Can I just lock myself in my basement with a textbook, record myself, and become a master entirely on my own?
That is the dream of the self-taught internet era, isn't it? But the research points to a very uncomfortable truth.
Hit me.
While solo practice is necessary, it is almost never sufficient for world-class mastery. One of the most critical, yet frequently overlooked implications of Erickson's framework is the absolute, non-negotiable necessity of external coaching and expert feedback.
Okay, I want to push back on this a little, or at least play devil's advocate.
Sure.
Why can't I just be incredibly disciplined? If I know the 5 criteria of deliberate practice, why can't I self-administer the medicine? Is a coach just there for motivation and accountability?
Motivation and accountability are helpful byproducts, but they are not the core function.
Okay, so what is?
The fundamental reason you cannot self-administer elite practice is due to a biological and cognitive bottleneck known as the limits of self-observation.
The limits of self-observation. Break that down for me.
When you are engaged in a complex, high-stakes performance, whether you are executing a golf swing, delivering a keynote speech, or performing surgery, your cognitive bandwidth is almost entirely consumed by the act of execution.
Right. You're just trying to survive the task.
Exactly. You simply do not have the spare neurological processing power to simultaneously step outside of your body and objectively analyze the biomechanics or the nuanced flaws of your own performance in real time.
It's the ultimate blind spot. I can't see the awkward hitch in my golf swing because my brain is entirely focused on trying to hit the ball. The internal feeling of the movement doesn't match the external reality of the movement.
Precisely. You cannot be both the performer and the objective critic simultaneously without degrading the performance itself.
That makes total sense.
That is the primary function of the expert coach. They provide 3 critical pillars of development that you cannot generate internally. The first, as we just established, is a purely objective external perspective. They have the bandwidth to watch you because they don't have to perform the action.
Okay, so pillar 1 is being the external camera. What is pillar 2?
Pillar 2 is deep, internalized domain expertise. This allows the coach to engage in root cause analysis.
Root cause analysis.
Yes. A novice observer, or even the performer themselves, will often misidentify the problem because they only see the symptom. An elite coach sees past the symptom to the invisible mechanical cause.
I need an example of this symptom versus cause dynamic because I think it's a brilliant distinction.
Let's imagine a highly talented opera singer working with a master vocal coach. During an aria, the singer's pitch goes noticeably flat on a sustained high note.
Okay.
The symptom is obvious. The note is flat. If the singer is self-coaching, their internal feedback says, I missed the pitch. I need to push harder and force the note higher.
Which probably just strains their vocal cords.
Exactly. But the master coach isn't listening to the pitch. They are watching the biomechanics. The coach notices that as the singer approached the high note, they subtly raise their shoulders and lock their jaw.
Oh, wow.
The coach knows that jaw tension constricts the larynx, which restricts the airflow, which inevitably causes the pitch to drop. So the coach stops the singer and says, "Do not worry about the note. Focus entirely on keeping your jaw unhinged and your shoulders dropped during the ascent."
That is profound. The coach doesn't treat the missed note. They treat the structural flaw causing the missed note. They isolate the mechanic.
Exactly.
And I assume that leads directly to the third pillar.
Yes. The third pillar is the design of custom corrective practice activities.
Right.
Once the coach diagnoses the root cause, the tense jaw, they don't just tell the singer to try the whole song again. They design a highly specific, repetitive, isolated exercise aimed solely at maintaining a relaxed jaw while moving up the scale.
They curate the deliberate practice for the performer.
Yes. The research consistently demonstrates that the most rapid, efficient skill development occurs when a practitioner is subjugated to the watchful eye of a master coach who can dynamically adjust the practice routine based on real-time failure.
I completely accept the necessity of the coach. The logic is flawless, but I have to advocate for the listener right now who might be feeling a sense of despair.
I get that.
Because access to a master coach is a luxury. It requires geographical proximity, immense financial resources, and time. What if someone listening right now wants to master Python coding or creative writing or foreign language and they are doing it alone in their apartment after their kids go to sleep?
It's a common scenario.
Is the door to mastery simply locked for the solo learner?
The door is never locked, but the path for the solo learner is significantly steeper. If you cannot afford or access a master coach, your primary objective is to hack the system.
How do we do that?
You must relentlessly attempt to substitute the coach's external perspective and diagnostic ability with artificial mechanisms. You have to build a personalized feedback ecosystem that tells you the objective, unvarnished truth about your performance.
How do we construct that ecosystem? The research we reviewed offered some very concrete, actionable strategies for the solo learner.
The first, most accessible and paradoxically most underutilized strategy is recording yourself.
Oh, I know exactly why it's underutilized, because it is psychologically agonizing.
It is excruciating. Nobody enjoys listening to the sound of their own voice on a recording or watching their awkward posture on video.
It's the worst.
But that visceral discomfort is the exact feeling of confronting your own incompetence, which is the prerequisite for deliberate practice. If you are practicing a presentation, do not just practice in front of a mirror. Record it on your phone, wait an hour to detach yourself emotionally, and then watch it with a notepad.
The camera provides the objective external perspective that your brain cannot maintain while performing.
Exactly. It forces you to confront reality instead of your perception of reality.
Okay, what is the next hack?
The strategic extraction of feedback from advanced peers. Notice I did not say friends.
Right.
If you ask a friend, "How was my presentation?" the social contract dictates that they say, "You were great, very engaging." That is useless validation.
It feels good, but it builds zero myelin.
Exactly. To hack the coaching dynamic, you must constrain the peer's feedback to a highly specific diagnostic metric. You go to a colleague who is an excellent public speaker and you say, "I am trying to eliminate filler words, and I want to ensure my transition between slide 3 and 4 is logically sound. Please watch my presentation, tally every time I say and tell me only if that specific transition made sense."
You are essentially giving them a rubric. You are turning a peer into a temporary, hyper-focused coach.
Yes. The third strategy is to deliberately place yourself in competitive environments that ruthlessly expose your specific weaknesses.
Ooh, I like this one.
If you are playing chess, do not play against the computer on a generalized setting. Find an opponent who specializes in the specific opening defense that always trips you up. Force yourself into the zone of targeted discomfort.
Don't play the tennis partner you always beat. Play the one with the aggressive slice that makes you look foolish.
And finally, utilize structured, objective assessment tools. We live in an era of incredible technological leverage.
We really do.
Use software that grades the efficiency and elegance of your code, not just whether it runs. Use language apps that use acoustic analysis to grade the accuracy of your pitch and pronunciation. You must seek out data that does not care about your ego.
I love that framing.
Yeah.
You need data that does not care about your ego. Let's take all of this abstract psychology, the neuroscience of neuroplasticity, the coaching hacks, and anchor it into a highly practical, real-world application.
Let's do it.
I want to pivot to a topic that was heavily featured in the research and one that resonates with almost everyone: adult language learning.
Oh, language acquisition is perhaps the ultimate crucible for testing the deliberate practice framework. Almost every adult attempts to learn a second language at some point, and almost universally, they smash into the exact same cognitive walls and experience the exact same frustrations.
The infamous intermediate plateau. You learn how to order coffee, you learn the colors, and then you just stop progressing.
Exactly.
And I have a very personal confession to make here.
Let's hear it.
For the last 3 years, I have been trying to learn Spanish, and my primary method has been what I call passive immersion.
Oh, no.
I will sit on my couch after work, turn on a Spanish television show on Netflix, put the English subtitles on, and sit there for 2 hours. And I tell myself a very convincing lie. I am studying. I am immersing my brain in the language. The neuroplasticity is happening.
It pains me to do this, but I have to completely dismantle that illusion right now.
Please do.
The research is unequivocally unsparing on this exact behavior. What you are doing is exposing your brain to comprehensible input, which has some baseline value for familiarization, but it is unequivocally, biologically not deliberate practice.
Why not, though? I am hearing the native cadence. I'm exposing myself to the vocabulary.
Because it violates the foundational criteria we established earlier. First, it lacks intense cognitive effort. You are relaxing on a couch, allowing the English subtitles to do the heavy lifting of comprehension.
Tilty.
Second, it lacks productive limits. You are not operating the edge of your capability. You are resting comfortably in the zone of what you already know or can easily guess from context. And most crucially, it completely lacks targeted, real-time corrective feedback.
Right, because the TV show doesn't pause and correct my grammar when I misinterpret a sentence in my head.
Exactly. Passive listening is a receptive state, not a generative one. And frankly, even when language learners attempt to be active by reviewing the same flashcards of words they already know, or having casual conversations where they only use safe, familiar grammatical structures, they are still just engaging in naive repetition. They are maintaining their plateau, not climbing it.
Practicing what you already know is maintenance, not development.
Perfectly said.
So, if Netflix with subtitles is a comfortable lie, what does actual myelin-building, neuroplasticity-inducing, deliberate practice look like for an adult language learner?
True deliberate practice in language learning requires the messy, uncomfortable generation of output in unpredictable contexts.
Messy output.
Yes. It means engaging in unscripted conversations with native speakers where you are forced to construct complex sentences on the fly. You must push yourself to use vocabulary you are only 50% sure about. You will inevitably stumble, you will conjugate verbs incorrectly, and you will sound foolish.
Which triggers that intense psychological discomfort we talked about earlier.
Yes. And here's the critical mindset shift. When you make that error, and the native speaker looks confused or explicitly corrects you, you cannot retreat into embarrassment.
Which is what everyone wants to do.
Of course. But you must recognize that correction as the immediate diagnostic feedback required for long-term potentiation. The error is not a failure. It is the precise neurological coordinate telling your brain exactly where the myelin needs to be deposited.
Oh, I love that. The error is the compass. If you aren't making errors, you aren't practicing deliberately.
Exactly.
But what about listening? Because a big part of the sources focused on how to actually practice listening comprehension deliberately, specifically referencing the European framework levels like B2 and C1.
This is a highly effective application of the theory. For context, B2 and C1 represent advanced, intermediate to advanced levels of language proficiency. At these levels, the audio material features native speakers talking at natural speed, using idiomatic expressions, complex sentence structures, and overlapping dialogue. It is objectively difficult.
But the key is that it is comprehensible if you focus, right? Which places it perfectly in that zone of proximal development, slightly above your current level.
Exactly. When you engage with B2 or C1 audio without subtitles, you cannot be passive. You must strain your cognitive resources to parse the rapid stream of syllables into distinct words and grammatical structures. You have to rewind, listen again, and force your brain to map the acoustic signal to the meaning.
It's a workout.
It is. By subjecting yourself to that intense, focused strain repeatedly, you are literally forcing your auditory cortex to build the specific pattern libraries required to decode that language. You are heavily myelinating the neural pathways responsible for foreign phone recognition.
You are structurally renovating your ear to hear the world the way a native speaker does.
Yes.
And that beautifully sets up the final piece of this puzzle, because everything we've discussed, from chess patterns to myelin sheaths to language acquisition, ultimately culminates in a fundamental shift in how we view ourselves and how we talk about our own potential.
The vocabulary we use to frame our own development is not just semantics. It has a profound, measurable impact on our biological and psychological capacity to learn. The words we choose dictate the limits of our neuroplasticity.
This brings us squarely into the territory of Carol Dweck's landmark research on the growth mindset.
Such important work.
I know it's a concept that has been heavily commercialized, but when you look at it through the lens of everything we've discussed today, the biology of LTP and myelination, the underlying truth of it is absolute bedrock.
It is the psychological key that unlocks the biological engine. Dweck's research focuses on the differential impact of attribution meaning. To what do we attribute our successes and our failures? Our culture provides us with distinct binaries: talent versus developed ability, giftedness versus mastery.
If I operate with a fixed mindset, I attribute my performance entirely to innate talent. I say things like, I'm just not a math person, or I don't have an ear for languages, or I'm not a natural public speaker.
And when you use that vocabulary, you are constructing a psychological prison. Because ability is innate and fixed, then every time you encounter struggle or failure, your brain interprets that friction not as a necessary part of the learning process, but as definitive proof of your permanent biological inadequacy.
That's devastating.
When things get hard, when the deliberate practice gets uncomfortable, the fixed mindset individual quits because they believe they have simply hit their genetic ceiling.
But if you internalize the research we've unpacked today, if you understand that your brain is a dynamic, highly adaptable organ capable of synthesizing myelin to speed up neural processing, you adopt a growth mindset. You attribute your performance to the quality of your strategy and the intensity of your effort.
Exactly. With a growth mindset, failure is completely de-weaponized. It is no longer an indictment of your character or your genetics. It is simply a neutral data point that says, my current mental representation is incomplete, or I have not applied enough targeted, deliberate practice to this specific neural circuit yet.
I haven't built the math myelin yet. It shifts the timeline from never to not yet. And learning to fluently speak this vocabulary of growth framing your career and your hobbies in terms of developed ability rather than giftedness is arguably the most critical meta skill you can possess in a rapidly changing world.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today, and I want to bring all these incredible threads together. We started by looking at the master at work, wondering if they were simply born fundamentally different from the rest of us. We followed the science to the practice rooms of Berlin, where elite violinists ground out 10,000 hours of solitary discomfort.
Such a powerful study.
We peered into the minds of chess grandmasters and firefighters, discovering that intuition is just rapid pattern recognition. We examined the biology of neuroplasticity, visualizing the myelin wrapping around our neural circuits like insulation on a wire, physically optimizing our brains for speed and efficiency.
The hardware and the software.
Right. We debunked the dangerous oversimplification of the 10,000-hour rule, realizing that unstructured repetition is a trap. We explored how to hack the vital coaching process for ourselves, and we applied the brutal truth of deliberate practice to our own struggles with language learning and professional development.
The grand synthesis of decades of cognitive research, the ultimate takeaway from all this data, is a message of profound biological optimism. Expertise is not a lottery ticket you are handed at birth by the genetic gods. Mastery is a highly mechanical, structural, and physical renovation of your own brain.
A physical renovation.
And that renovation is entirely within your control, built through highly specific, meticulously diagnosed, deeply uncomfortable, and rigorously feedback-rich effort.
It is the most empowering realization imaginable, but I will admit it is also a little terrifying, because it violently strips away our favorite comfort blanket. It places the responsibility for our own mediocrity or our own greatness squarely back on our own shoulders.
It demands accountability. And on that note, I want to leave everyone listening with a final lingering thought to mull over, long after this audio stops playing.
Bring it home.
Think deeply about that one specific skill or ambition you have carried with you for years. The one you have repeatedly told yourself you simply aren't talented enough to pursue. Maybe it's writing a novel, learning to code, speaking French fluently, or stepping into a leadership role.
Yeah, we all have one.
We do. If innate talent is largely a societal fiction in cognitive domains, if the biological reality is that mastery is genuinely just a matter of constructing the right mental pattern library through targeted, deliberate discomfort, what happens to your lifelong excuse? Are you truly lacking a biological gift? Or are you simply avoiding the uncomfortable, frustrating, magnificent work required to build your own myelin?
That is a question that is going to demand an answer from all of us. Thank you to everyone out there for giving us your time and joining us on this deep dive into the true nature of mastery. Until next time, keep chasing the discomfort.